Good.
Let's see, where are we? Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the March 11th Select Board meeting. Hi, Rick. How are you doing?
Excellent. Yourself?
Good. Hi, Terry.
Hello.
Well, we'll now call the meeting to order and leap right in. Rick, have you had an opportunity to review the minutes of the last meeting?
I have. I had only one question. I reached out to Terry earlier who answered it. So I have no changes to any of it. I found it all to be accurate.
Fantastic. Do you want to make a motion to accept?
So moved.
All right, and I will second. And is there further discussion? Hearing none, we will call the matter to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Rick is aye, Andrew is aye, and the motion carries. All right, now I've got my agenda together here. Just trying to get both screens on the screen. Uh-oh, where did that go? Okay. There it is, okay. All right, next up is department liaison reports. Rick.
On the police department, the only new thing of interest I have for you this evening is that the chief reached out to officials in Shelburne and Buckland to start the ball rolling for establishing the Shared Police Advisory Committee. They use the acronym SPAC as it was outlined in the merger agreement with Buckland. And the ball is rolling. There's things to do. There's positions to be elected, excuse me, appointed by the two different boards, training, etc. So it'll be a slow process to get it going, but the ball's in motion in any event.
Great.
Emergency Management Committee will be meeting this month. To clarify, I mentioned at my last report, the confusion on its composition and its responsibilities. And with the able town assistant guidance, I was able to dig through documents going back to 2011 and have put together a sequential report of votes taken by select boards since then. In fact, we found an actual establishment of the committee, which we didn't think there was one before, and we actually found one. I'm going to present that to the emergency management director and then the entire group, get some consensus, and then I will bring it in to our meeting to take some a vote or two to get things reorganized, because it was a matter of a perpetuation of
supper. You eat your supper.
Someone should mute their microphone. Where was I? We're on track. We've got it. I think it's figured out. It's well documented, and it will help that committee with the questions they had for me the very first meeting that I attended with that group. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you very much. Terry, anything from you on the town side?
I just wanted to mention, a while back, we discussed the possibility of sharing accounting services with the town of Whately, and we met a few times. We developed an IMA agreement, and then the Whately town administrator took a job elsewhere. So I've spoken to Bob Dean, the FRCOG. They're willing to carry us another year. Other towns are not jumping yet. So we will maintain our relationship with a FRCOG contracted employee for accounting services at a level funded fee for this coming year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So, but our accountant is working for Whately, is that not correct?
That is correct. yes, but we couldn't reach an agreement that satisfied the individual. She just had way too many questions. And with Whately's town administrator leaving, she didn't feel comfortable. She would rather in the future be an employee or contracted services for each town individually rather than combined. So it's something for us to look at
I
the
see.
next year.
Okay. All right. So we have another year to figure it out then.
Yes.
Okay, good. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, well, I got a few things. I did, on the highway end of things, I did speak to Mark on Friday. And he said the crew is getting ready to implement the Old Greenfield Road project, which is a full reclamation, drainage, culverts, guardrails, trees, rebuild of Old Greenfield Road from Route 2 all the way to the Greenfield town line. It's funded with our $1 million MassWorks grant, and they're just cataloging culverts and filling out the shoulders getting together with Jim Richardson to mark trees for cutting. Mark did mention that he thought the pricing for materials is now stabilizing, so he thinks the project will come in, will be able to be completed with that funding. They are also going to do not a full rebuild, but just a mill and pave project on Mechanic and Church Streets with about $111,000 in Chapter 90 money. And that will go from the corner of Mechanic and Church up the hill to Maple Street on Church Street, and then from the same corner down to Hope Street on Mechanic Street, past the school. So that's just a milling and paving project. And then the state will actually do a similar milling and paving project on South Maple Street from Church over to Bridge, and then from Bridge Street back down to Mechanic Street. So we'll get a fair amount of footage there in the village, repaved with those two funding sources. And they'll put in a new culvert on South Maple Street, where I guess we've had some flooding problems. And Mark said that they are beginning to work on the radar signs on Mechanic Street, but we're waiting for better weather, so they'll probably start that this week. And the only other project he mentioned, they're starting to look at a repaving project on Cooper Lane, most of which is dirt, but has paved portions on the top and bottom ends that apparently are wearing out. So that's something they'll be doing in the summer or fall. So that's what Mark had for me. Just a few updates on other projects. The tech school is back at work on the Pocket Park, which was nice to see. They've had quite a bit of turnover over the past year in their carpentry instructors, or the instructors for their carpentry program. I think they've had 3 different instructors. And so that has slowed down our project, but Mike Nobrega is back on the job, and they made some progress this week, and they're going to come back on March 18th. They work every 2 weeks, and then they have class time in between when they're not working on projects. So they're hoping to finish by the later part of April. So that's their current timeline. We will, there has been forward movement on the the matching grant for Memorial Hall Theater, and we are in conversation with an architect, so we'll have more to report on that, and perhaps Jim Kessler, who's the president of Memorial Hall Association, will come and give us an update soon as we about where that stands. But there has been some good progress in launching that capital campaign and getting that project underway. What was the other thing I was going to mention? I think that's it. So we are almost at 5:45 here, so I think we're close enough that we can recognize Jeff Bettner from the Energy Committee to talk about a Green Communities grant application. Jeff, you're on board here.
All right. Thanks so much, Andrew and Rick. Yeah, so basically coming before you to ask to get permission. We have teamed up with Allison Gage from FERCog, who is willing to help write the grant for Green Communities. And John Walsh has been working with her a little bit. But we're still waiting for Green Communities to actually publish their new requirements for the grant. So we really don't know too much about it at this point. I think it's going to be mostly an online submission type thing. So, but Allison's already knows kind of the inner workings of that. So we'll be working with Allison to try and pass that through. But what I mainly need is your permission to go forward with doing that grant, and also to ask you whether that grant should come from the Energy Committee or the Streetlight Committee. I don't know quite, whether how that works.
They generally come from the town of Shelburne.
Or town of Shelburne. Okay.
Yeah, and that you can
Okay.
reference whichever one you think is the leading entity, working to design it, but it is coming from the town.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay.
You
Well, I
did-
just
you
wasn't
did-
sure.
You didn't mention it top, so this is a grant for streetlights.
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
okay. You had to
Sorry.
mention that
I'm
before.
sorry. Yeah, it's totally.
I filled in the
totally a
gap
grant.
by myself, but
Right.
Oh, sorry, it's totally, that's a major gaffe.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's totally a light, to try and, look to see how much they would help chip in on the street light proposal. They used to fund pretty much the whole thing, but I'm not sure if they're still doing that. So we're still trying to work out just how much they would help kick in. But it looks fairly promising, so I think that's a really good route to go. And John Walsh, I don't know, he's not on tonight yet, but I think he's coming on later. I think he also wants to look into tacking on to that something for Cowell Gym, like maybe energy shades or something for Cowell Gym. But I'll let John tell you that part when he shows up. And then. Yeah, well, I've got a couple other things, but just wanted to, I don't know whether you have to do a formal motion to let us proceed or not, how that works exactly.
Well, why don't we make a motion and then we can talk further if there are more
Okay.
questions.
That's good.
Do you want to move that, Rick?
certainly, I would move that we authorize Jeff on behalf of the town of Shelburne to apply for the Green Communities grant for the purpose of streetlight support.
I'll second that. Or streetlight conversion to LEDs is our project.
Correct.
But good. So the motion's been made and seconded. Is there further questions and discussion?
The other thing is, since we have the finance committee on here too, I also need to make an appointment with them to to run some of the numbers by them and try and get some help with trying to figure out how to best do that, as well as for writing the warrant as well. So just if you're on their finance committee, I am thinking about you. We haven't really had solid numbers yet to bring to you, but I think we're getting very, very close on that. They're now doing Real Term Energy is doing the official IGA that'll give us the true investment grade audit. And since we've now decided what lights we're doing, they can actually tailor it to each individual light fixture and we have enough money to do that with about, well, I guess I'm doing 93 lights at this point, which brings us in just under the $9,100. So we'll probably be right around $9,000 for the total 6 things that Real Term is doing. So, and they're kicking back some money. You guys had paid out a fair amount, and they're now taking some of that off, and they moved it because some of the lights really we shouldn't have had to pay for. So we've now, I think we've balanced it out, so we can move ahead. And I've talked to them today. They're actually now moving ahead on the IGA. So we should have that in a few weeks, and that'll tell us a lot, because that'll be a really precise number on what we need going forward.
Great.
Any other questions?
Oh, my only comment would be good work, Jeff, and I appreciate your diligence in the attention to detail.
I thought it was diligence until yesterday when I ran around for just checking some numbers for them for Real Term. I found a street light that wasn't on my list.
See, that's diligence to me, man.
Right on Route 2. I drove by it every day, and I thought it was on their list. They thought it was on the list, and when I actually looked, it wasn't on the list. So it's like, I guess you learn things every day, but yeah.
Terry, do you have any questions or thoughts?
No.
Okay. Jeff, I'm just curious, is there a range of money that Green Communities might award us, or is it just something you're sort of negotiating with them?
That's still what we're trying to find out, what they're willing to do. They used to fund the whole thing, but they won't fund certain parts. So they wouldn't fund the first thing that we had already just funded, which is the $9,000 to have the first preliminary study. And they also won't fund the $14,500 that goes towards buying the light fixtures from Eversource, but the rest of it is up for grabs possibly. So we could do really well if they'll still do the whole thing. And they were kicking around for a while, but I don't think they've really officially put out what their goals are yet from Green Communities, because they seem to be delaying, which I don't know when that'll actually go. It was supposed to be due on April 12th, so I'm hoping they come out with stuff pretty soon, so that we actually know what we're applying for. So, but I don't want to spring it on you guys late, but we just don't even know what we're submitting. But it looks fairly straightforward, so I'm not too worried about it.
Good. Well, thanks for that. Rick, do you have any other questions or comments?
I'm good.
The one other thing while we're on the subject, I'm also going to be doing, I think April 17th, probably at the community center, but I haven't firmed it up, from about 7 o'clock on to, if people want to come out, we're going to do a street light talk and kind of let people know what we're doing. So I'm going to try and get the word out in the two-town news, and once we finalize the date, but just set aside April 17th, anybody out there who would like to hear about streetlights. I've been talking to neighbors' ears off about streetlights now, so I don't know how many will actually show for this. But
and what time again is that?
That's April 17th, and we'll probably start it at about 7, I think, unless you guys think it should go earlier, but I'm guessing 7 gets more people there. I'll probably open it up at 6:30 or something like that. And then I also need from you guys, when's the warrant article due officially for the town meeting? When we get
Hold
on 1 second, Jeff.
Okay.
It would have to be before April 8th.
Okay.
Time is flying.
Yeah. So we hopefully we'll have all the right numbers, but we may just put a warrant through, and then is it possible to change the numbers without changing the wording necessarily much of the warrant, like for the actual amount that we're going for before the meeting?
Yes,
We
you'll
could lower
have
it. I mean, it would
time.
be lowered if anything. So
Yeah, you would have time to amend the numbers.
okay, that's good. All right, because we do have a rough draft of, John Walsh has been helping a lot on that, and we had an attorney actually who helped with that a year ago, so we'll revisit that and see what we got, but we'll get you a warrant fairly soon, and so.
Good.
Great. Okay,
Great. Well, if there's no further discussion, we'll bring the motion to a vote. All in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and the motion carries, and you are authorized to go ahead and write that grant.
we'll get it.
All right.
I wish we could just say it would get us the money, but we'll see. I've lived off of grants for 32 years, so I know it doesn't always get you the money. We'll certainly try. Okay, thanks so much. I really appreciate it and all your
Good.
help. Well, Rick has been at many of our streetlight meetings until he's bored with streetlights probably by now, so I appreciate it.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. That's great work. All right. Well, we have a few minutes until 6 o'clock, which is our next appointment with the Shelburne Free Public Library for their budget presentation. So we will take a look at knock off some of our other agenda items. Under new business, we have the Arms Academy Alumni Association requesting funds to paint the flagpole with 2 quotes provided. Terry, any further background on that?
No, apparently the flagpole is near and dear to the Arms Academy alumni because it was gifted. And because it's over 60 feet in height, it requires a lift to paint it. We had offered the flagpole that was near the Veterans Memorial on the Buckland Shelburne School grounds, but they weren't interested in it. So they've asked if the town would consider paying for the cost of painting because it's on town property.
Mm-hmm. And is this something that we have done before, or have we never been required to
Not
paint?
in my time have we. We split the cost of cutting the shrubs around the Arms Academy building, but this flagpole is a new request.
Their letter to us says that it's previously been their responsibility, not the town's, but that they no longer have the resources to do it
Mhm.
in their cover letter.
Right, yeah, I see that. So, and we've got quotes from them for 3,000 and 33.35. Rick, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one thing they didn't further explain was in their first part of their request, Arms Academy. The town requires quotes for painting the 60-foot metal flagpole, which is in need of restoration. Sounds more comprehensive than a paint job to me, but then the price might include additional work or treating rust issues or whatever it is they meant by the word restoration, as opposed to needs to be repainted. I would put some confidence in the folks, and I don't have a problem supplying it if we have the appropriate place to pull the money from to do it.
Well, a couple of questions I have. One goes right to that and says, Terry, are there particular beautification or other pots of money that we might draw this from, or is it something we would put on the warrant to have funded for next year?
I think it would have to go on the warrant. We don't have this kind of money anywhere as a surplus in any given budget. So I would almost want to ask the Arms Academy alumni if they would share in the cost. And if they would, we could put it on the warrant.
That was kind of my next question, was whether we could go back to them and see what their their proposal might be for splitting or sharing the cost in one way or the other. Because I think I would, since if we do indeed have to put this on the warrant, that would be I think a nice way to sell it to the voters would be to say that this is a partnership that we have been engaged in for many years, and we've shared costs in the past, and we're proposing to do that again. I mean, that seems reasonable to me, unless they're, completely broke and about to close their doors or something, but if that were the case, I would probably be less inclined to keep the flagpole going. So it seems that that the flagpole is part of their operation, and if it is indeed important to them, I'd like to see them chip in some. I don't know. What's your thought on that, Rick?
Well, it's adjacent to the Historical Society. So it's really a twofer. It's not just the Arms Academy Association. Is that correct?
There we are.
There you are.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. And your mic is right there if you need to turn it on.
There you go. Yeah, so this is not so that's right. This is not the Historical Society funding this at all, but the Alumni Association has been involved in maintaining the hedges and things like that.
We split the cost every year to have a vendor come in and trim the hedges.
Okay.
And that's budgeted for in our buildings and grounds account. We've done that for years.
Okay. Well, Terry, would you be willing to ask them if they would like to make a matching contribution to this project? Okay,
Sure, and I'll report back at the next meeting.
sounds good.
And if so, would they be willing to put together the warrant for it, right?
Oh, that's easy for me to do.
Well, I mean, yes, okay. Just they need to know that that's the process.
Yes.
Okay.
Great. All righty. Well, we are just about at 6 o'clock, and I think we can come back to the Shelburne Free Public Library. Do we have anybody from the library with us?
Yes. We have Ted Sicker
Oh, there's
as
Ted.
treasurer.
Great, and there's
Betsy
Betsy.
Anthea.
Okay. Fantastic. Who would like to open us up here?
I guess I can start as treasurer. So we went through the budget and looked at how the expenses were going for the 6 months. Some things were a little unusual, like no cost for fuel oil during that time, but I guess we had filled up before the end of the fiscal year. So we've since gotten some deliveries on that. The one change that there is compared to last year's budget is that we increased the substitute library assistant line by a couple of hours a week. And Betsy can talk a little bit about some of our thinking on that. But otherwise, things are pretty much flat from last year. We continued budgeting for literacy programming. Unfortunately, what happened is we lost our 2 Saturday kids readers midway through the year, so we've had to suspend that program until we find a new person. But it was quite popular, so we're hoping to bring that back again when Betsy finds somebody.
Betsy, do you have any more on that you want to share?
On the, on what?
Just the budget or your?
Oh, the budget in general. Oh,
Yeah.
well, just that, we're looking at what it looks at the library to have more than one person on at a time, or we'd like to increase the hours of a second person on at the library. So we've been exploring that and possibly looking into a staff increase eventually. Not this year, but what that would mean in terms of payroll and hours and specific hours to have a second person at the library.
And also a job description for that.
And a job
person.
description, yeah, definitely, yep.
So that's more of a long-term
Yep.
I see.
plan that we might have.
Other than that, it's pretty much business as usual, I think, in the budget. Except for what Ted was talking about, with the programming. It's very hard to get people in who can do the programming on a regular basis. Yeah, it's kind of a standard difficult position to fill across libraries. So, but we're trying.
And what is, I know this is something for the future, not the present, but what is sort of driving your discussion about having 2 staff people on at one time?
Well, security, comfort for, people who working alone can be difficult at times. We do have a good security system in place, but it's kind of, there's a lot of discussion about it in library world. And to have a solo worker is, you need to have, I think that people are feeling a bit more challenged these days by social things, that and working alone is a unique situation. So, and in an isolated place.
And particularly in the winter when the days are shorter and you're working there alone in the dark.
Yeah, right.
Specifically on Thursday night. Yeah, it's a concern, I mean, it's a concern for all the time, I guess, but that's certainly when it would be particularly concerning, I would think. Yeah.
Finance Committee, do you have any questions or comments for the library presenters?
Andrew, the Finance Committee doesn't have a quorum this evening, so they're just here to listen.
Oh, okay. Well, they're still allowed to ask questions, aren't they?
They can if they wish.
Okay. You got any questions? Finance Committee, are you there? Well, here, I guess they're in listening mode then. Rick, any questions or comments?
Yeah, you mentioned the library assistant line was one that you had increased the hours in. If I look at the dollar figure for the previous and projected, you've roughly doubled the hours. So you're looking for 7 hours a week now. Previously, was it 3.5-ish or
It
3?
was 5. In the last year's budget, it was 5.
So it went from 4,100 to 6,100 with 2 more hours a week. Guess that could happen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with also a 3.5% salary increase.
that's right. Yeah. Okay. No, I didn't have any other questions on the other line items. They all seem reasonable to me.
Great.
And I think you can see it in the comments. The salaries increased by 3.5% on an hourly basis. The overall budget that we're asking from the town is a 3% increase over last year's.
Harry, any questions or comments on your end?
No.
All right. Well, if there's no further questions or comments, well, thank you for your presentation, and
Sure.
we'll carry it forward. Appreciate you coming in to share your thoughts with us, and Any particular highlights for next year that you want to give us a sneak preview on, or anything else before you go?
We're getting a new Dropbox.
All right.
So one of the things that you will see in there is the line furnishings pilot programming. We already spent more than we had budgeted out of our endowments for this fiscal year. So we've done some interior improvements, and we have plans to do the exterior improvement as well over the
Great.
next few months.
All righty. Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much for all three of you for coming in.
Mhm.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All righty.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
I,
All right. Well, we've got a ways off for Joe. So we'll forge ahead on more new and old business. Let's see, we've got under new business B, Julie Moreno from the Senior Center is requesting to hire a part-time custodian. Terry, do you have more on that?
Yes, it was an internal posting. She had 2 individuals apply. She checked references on both and then recommended that the select board hire John Heddens at an hourly rate of $19.25.
Great. Rick, any thoughts or comments on that?
this is a new position, right?
No, the position was, it's been a routine position, but the individual that filled it has since resigned. So Julie's actually been cleaning the senior center in the interim.
And the figure of 19.25 is in line with what it had been, or?
Yes, yes.
As I read it, she certainly did her due diligence as well. It's twice I've said that tonight. Yeah, it's a position, pre-existing position that's unfilled. I see no reason not to approve the hiring of John Heddens. And I will so move if you wish to debate it further.
Sure, I'll second that. And just now that we're in discussion, Terry, just one question I have about that is we also have part-time help who do cleaning in other town buildings, don't we?
We do, and though that individual was approached and not interested in taking on another building. The
Oh, okay.
senior center cleans more frequently than the town.
I see. Okay. That was really my only other question, was whether we could achieve any efficiency by, having the same person work on the various town buildings, but sounds like not. But thanks for giving that an opportunity to happen. Well, if there's no further questions or discussion about that, we'll bring it to a vote. All in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and John Heddens is hired. So thank you to Julie. We have, item C of new business is fees collected in addition to one's salary. And I had put this on the agenda because it's something I've been interested in resolving or winding up for some time. And Rick, I don't know to what extent you're already familiar with this and your investigations of town office doings, but I think at least 2 of our town officials, the clerk and the treasurer collector, each collect fees for various items, you know, licenses and other things. And Massachusetts law allows them to keep those fees as part of their salary. And I personally object to that in principle as a way of compensating our town employees. And I much prefer, I have no wish to take compensation away from our town employees. I would simply prefer to see the ledger be balanced with revenue on one side and expense on the other, and salaries clearly identified across the board, so that when we do you know, salary negotiations with people, we can easily go to a FERCog, you know, wage and salary study and say, what do comparable people make in this position? And not have to make guesses about whether or not they're collecting additional fees above and beyond their regular salary. So to me, this is just sort of a accounting cleanup project that I would like to see us move into a more present day way of compensating our employees. I think one of the reasons I object to it in principle goes back to the early days of the New Testament, which you may remember the tax collector being one of the most hated people in the Roman Empire. And the reason for that is because tax collecting was such an onerous job that they bid it out, and people would bid for it and then keep part of the taxes and turn over, render unto Caesar some other portion of them, which created a fairly, you know, corrupt system that people objected to paying their taxes, and, you know, partly because they were paying the tax collector. And I'm not suggesting in any way that any of our employees are corrupt, but the system dates from that kind of time and just seems very antique. And I would much rather see us just pay our employees salaries and have them collect taxes on behalf of the town and have the taxes go into the general ledger or the general fund. So that's my proposal in a nutshell. And I think just to add to that, I think the clerk has not been paying himself those fees. He's been sort of, you know, putting them into the general fund, or maybe Terry can clarify that, because I don't know exactly what's going on there, but
He's not collecting the fees, and the revenue does go into the general fund.
okay, but he is technically allowed to keep those fees
Yes.
under the current arrangement. So anyway, that would be my proposal, is that we you know, clean up the books with a clear statement of where those funds should go, and if that means we have to or we ought to renegotiate the salaries, we can do so accordingly.
Well, I've given this a lot of thought as well. I definitely am not thrilled with the idea of the equivalent of spot reevaluation of property or spot zoning, to pick one classification here and try to deal with it now. I don't care for that approach. I read our town bylaw today, and it does specifically state the right of the collector, and our collector and our treasurer are the same person. So there's two different positions, two different sets of fees. But our bylaws specifically allow the municipal lien fees to be retained by the collector, right in our own bylaws. So the people voted that in already. I hate to take that away without bringing it to town meeting, but bigger picture, when we have the clerk, the town clerk, who is not taking those fees, to not adjust his or her salary appropriately, at the same time would seem unfair. Let's make, if we're going to make a level playing field that is also transparent, let's do the whole thing. So I would want to look at both of those specifically as the two that you mentioned that can take fees. But on a bigger picture, I would like to see the town do a legitimate comparison of salaries. We're in a position where we have 3 at least key roles held by people that have been in long term. That means they get the 2.5–3% raise a year for 20 or 30 years. Those salaries of our town administrator, the town clerk, the superintendent of streets, long-term valuable employees that are the glue that keep this town together, are being paid a wage that, when you look at what's being paid for those same positions in our adjacent neighboring towns, is way out of scale. And when one of them chooses to leave, we're not even going to get looked at for the price we're paying them now. So I would like to see a good deep dive evaluation, comparative look by the COG or whomever to support reconsideration of them across the board and not look at just one individual position at the moment. You may recall the chief of police has also asked for a similar thing and brought us an older COG study of comparative similar sized town police departments that showed Shelburne seems to be consistently underpaying some of our most valuable employees.
Great. I'm not in disagreement with you, Rick. And just to clarify on the first point, I think I'm on the same page. I had suggested that we look at both the clerk and the treasurer collector being the 2 positions that have these sort of anomalous fee things attached to their compensation. So I'm not proposing we do it in a spot way at all. I'm saying let's look at the folks who have that strange form of compensation and fix it. And that may not be in our power to do so. That may be putting a motion on the warrant or a warrant article on the town warrant. So I'm only raising it to start the conversation and get your thoughts on it. The second one is really, a much broader proposal, which is kind of looking at wage and classification across the board, and I'm fine with that too. I think that's going to be a necessary and useful project that we, both coming from the merger, or not the merger, the sharing of our police departments and the highway department being the 2 places where we probably need to look at that soonest, but doing that in the context of overall townwide compensation is a good idea.
Good. Well, we agree, and that's great. The town bylaw, as I said, does allow the collector to maintain and keep those fees for municipal liens. It is my understanding that Massachusetts general laws allow the town clerk and the treasurer to keep specific fees. So I don't think it's anything we as a board can approve. That it is something that I think has to go to town meeting.
Yes.
So how do we move forward with that, with your idea? Would you like to?
Terry, what's the mechanics for making that kind of proposal to the voters?
Well, I think first you'd have to rescind the bylaw that allows the collector to keep the municipal lien fees, and then propose salary increases for both the town clerk and treasurer, with the understanding that they will no longer retain fees now or in the future.
Does that seem like a reasonable proposition that we could accomplish by town meeting time?
Between now and April 8th, it would have to be done, you know.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I think we have a fairly long history of averaging, you know, what's the general amount of this, you know, fee collection process, whether it's taken or waived, and you know, just use that kind of ballpark number to adjust the salaries. Is it more complicated than that?
I guess I would have to find out from both the town clerk and treasurer what their average collection is, and then go from there.
Mhm.
Joe's would be based on what he could have collected if he did, and Angel would have more concrete numbers.
Yeah.
So the wording wouldn't be to renegotiate their salary. Well, see, that's the sticky wicket for me. We're talking about renegotiating the salary for two or three positions rather, two people in the current case, and not others. Yes, it's we
I
have.
don't see it as a renegotiation, Rick. I see it more as a kind of hold harmless provision.
Interesting words. Yeah. So
I mean, it's the same money. We're just saying, put it on the right side of the ledger.
yeah. So is that something you'd like to see Terry pursue? Or Terry, can you pursue that in the amount of time left? Or
I certainly can have a conversation with both the treasurer collector and town clerk and come back with some kind of a proposal, hopefully between now and the next meeting.
well, I certainly wouldn't want to see one done without the other for sure. So I would support that, and hopefully you can bring it back at our next meeting.
Yeah, I would agree. And just to say, you know, if this looks fairly straightforward and not complicated, we could proceed on let's do it this town meeting. And if it looks complicated and was going to require lengthy discussions and all that, that we can do it a year from now. But it seems like, you know, it's certainly something that I have been in conversation with folks about for quite a few years. And I'd just like to see us, you know, clean it up.
I don't have a problem with the premise.
Yeah.
I have a problem with us underpaying key people in our town.
Right, and I agree with you, Rick, but that to me is a second project that I think is a, you know, townwide wage and classification project, you know. But so, all right, well, thank you, Terry, for looking into that. We have
Joe is here.
okay, we've exhausted new business, and it's 6:25. Are we allowed to jump into Joe's presentation 5 minutes
Yes.
early here?
I would
Okay.
say.
All right. Well, Joe, thanks for joining us. Are you
Thanks for
there?
having me. Thank you. I'm here.
Oh,
Yep.
Great. Do you want to lead us through your budget proposal?
Sure. It would probably include, I mean, I'm not sure if we want to include Hill Cemetery or not in this, but I'll keep it to the side in case we have time.
Okay.
So I guess the first one would be election expenses, which is 001-162-5400, if I need to say that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So as I go through this year, I just finished putting together the numbers for this year's election workers cost. And I think my request for 2025 is pretty much, you know, spot on. I think that additional elections, like in this particular year, I think additional election workers that aren't going to be needed in the future as elections get more and more complicated and more requirements are thrown upon us. I think this is an area that we're going to have to, you know, see increases in. And just a quick bit of history. I mean, I just carried on with the tradition that was pretty much brought before me, before I became town clerk. Beverly and I assume Lillian, maybe even Eleanor, they all paid their election workers, so I just continued doing that. I did increase the amounts by a few dollars to sort of, you know, draw up what I thought was fair. But I think this is a number that would definitely get us through, you know, the coming years of elections that we're going to be dealing with. This will be the largest election year that we'll have for a while. But, you know, if there's money left in this account, at the end of the year it goes back in the general fund, and there's very well likely will be next year. It'll be a short election year, but in the big election years, we need to be prepared, and this is one of them. So election workers request has gone up a bit. I've carried on the tradition of feeding my election workers, which I know there's some people that agree with that, some don't. But I want people there when they're there for long periods of time to be able to eat. Cost of food has gone up. Programming the ballot box, which we have to do this year 3 times, has gone up. Not so much because we have a new machine, just because the programming itself and the maintenance aspect of it has risen in cost. So I added a little bit there. Election supplies, you know, in a large election year, you know, election supplies are always necessary, even though Shelburne has a pretty good equipment, a pretty good stockpile of equipment. You know, we always need more. There's always things we need. Advertising, I don't do any advertising, so I suspect that probably I may someday, but you know, I use the things that I have the ability to do for free, and as much as I can. But I left that in there. Miscellaneous, I didn't raise that either. That's, to be honest, that's probably an area that we could go down in a few $100s if it helps. So that is an increase at the end of this, and results in an increase. And I wish the finance committee was here tonight so they could ask some questions about this, but
We do have members of the finance committee are here.
Oh, good. So they're at least listening. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is that expenses are going up. Good election workers are very important to have, especially the ones that have been trained over the last 10 years that I've been in this role. And we have a great crew, and we need to take care of them when they're under our care, meaning that on election day they're my responsibility. So, and the operating costs are just increasing as it is and everything else. So that's the basis behind that item. And if you guys have questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or I could just continue.
Rick, any questions on the election expense?
Not on that one, no.
Finance committee, any comments or questions? Joe, my only question is the last full year in which you have numbers, you turn back $2,000 from your 10-7 expense.
Yep.
And this year you're proposing to go up a couple of $1,000s. Is that because it's a 4-year election cycle year, or what?
Yeah, I think that's the case, and I think that what I'm seeing is just the costs rising in everything. In particular with the ballot box programming maintenance. I just paid a bill for, I think it was around $1,400 for that, and it's the first election of the year. So I'm never worried about turning back money. I'm always afraid of not having enough at the end. So I'm maybe being a little overcautious with this, but it's what I see and it's what my numbers came up with in relation to what I think I'll need as we move into 2025. And I anticipate, because we're going into a soft election year in 2025, I think that money will be turned back again, but then we're going to be moving right back into 2026 pretty quick, and that'll have at least one or two primaries in that year. So the last elections of this year is going to be very expensive. The November election and the state primary in September going to be costly. So just trying to make sure I don't have to come back for more money later.
All righty. So I don't hear
And
any further. Go ahead.
Well, I do appreciate your comment, Andrew, because I have felt the same way myself in the past when I sat in your chair.
Great. So moving on to record preservation, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we need to discuss what to do in a little bit in the coming year. I really want to start get into imaging more. I want to do more of that in 2025. Certainly, if I can fit it in the end of this year. There is a company that we've been working with in New Hampshire. And, they've been giving us input and insight in regards to what we might be able to do. And I think at some point in time, that might be more of a capital expense than it really is this year. But I have dozens upon dozens upon dozens of records that need to be preserved for future use. And I just received a bill from them for doing two vital books, and it was over $6,000 for the two. And what that does is it preserves the books, it collates them, because there's a lot of things that we find that are out of order from previous years.
So
And,
Joe, the question I have there is that I'm looking at your budget, and this year and last year you show zero expenses.
Well, I don't understand that, because I paid one bill this year already. And I've got another bill sitting right here waiting to be paid. So I'm not quite sure how I'm showing zero expenses.
Terry?
It's showing zero because Joe encumbered funds from the prior year. So in September of 2023, he spent $4,470. So it didn't hit his budget as an expense because the excess funds were set aside. Must be that the work he's had done recently wasn't done before December, or it would have shown up
Okay.
in the expense.
That's probably true. Yep. And the other one is just sitting here now waiting to be paid.
Well, that's helpful clarification. Joe, my only thought about this is that to point you in the direction of the Community Preservation Committee, because my understanding is that this kind of expense is a legitimate historic preservation eligible expense for using CPA funds on, which means you could do that work at a discount since we get some state matching funds out of that process.
And how is that coming? I mean, do we have funds in place right now?
Not yet, but starting this
Yep.
coming year, we will have funds that we will be able to expend. And so I'm not talking about this budget, but just pointing you to in the future to saying this and the cemetery both could potentially be areas where you could apply for CPA funds.
Right. And we've had this conversation before about the cemetery. And I've been having this conversation with people that I've been working with in regards to other towns already doing exactly what you said. So that is in my mind.
Good.
But
no, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Yep. And for me, the imaging is what I think is important. And I honestly believe, Rick and Andrew, that that's a broader scope of work than just my office. I know that Terry's mentioned before that she'd like to, do something with all the selectmen records that she has that date back, I don't know how many years, at least 3 decades probably or longer. And other places in the town hall, I'm sure, might want to take advantage of imaging. So I'm hoping that someday down the road, we can have a broader conversation once we pick someone who we think we'd like to work with. And I hope it's the people that I'm working with. And Terry and I have been trying to set up a time where we could sit down with them. It's just been a difficult thing to do and hear a little bit more, because from where I sit, everything I see is all positive, but it'd be nice if we could sort of work together as departments as we move into more of an imaging type model, and hope we can talk about that more in the future.
Right. But for now, it looks like you're just adjusting this budget to more closely reflect what you've been actually spending.
Yes, that's true.
Good. All right, we're on to town clerk's expense.
Okay. So I'd like to talk about, getting, I've been hinting at this for years, but I think that it may be time to start thinking about bringing an assistant in. And I modeled this request for the office assistant under personnel cost to look a little bit like what Buckland's doing. They've had an assistant with the town clerk for many, many years. And it's not an assistant per se to where they're here working with a town clerk every day, but you call them in when you need them, like during the census period would be a great time, especially in a year like this when you have large elections with the census coming in, being processed at the same time. It'd be great to have extra help. Other times of the year, like during election season, having an office assistant in here would be a big help to have her in here, him or her in here for a period of maybe a couple days. There are no set hours to it. You just come when you're called, and it's worked pretty well in Buckland. It had to be a special person that would be interested in that. But as I see it, I'm also wanting to find someone that would be interested in learning a little bit about how to do some things in relation to the fact that if I'm not here, they can actually go in and maybe do a death certificate. They can actually register someone to vote. They can actually do something that would, like if I'm away on vacation and I ask this person, maybe you'd like to come in on Monday and Tuesday while I'm away, or Tuesday and Thursday, that can actually help customers at the same time learn processes that will benefit us in the future if I decide to, leave this position, or worse yet, I don't get reelected. It would be helpful to have someone here that could at least show the new town clerk, where the pencils are, or how to look up a death certificate, or, any number of little chores that aren't really little. They're very important to the people that need them at the time. So I think a person like that would be invaluable to me and also to a new town clerk. Or maybe they might like the job so much that they might run for town clerk themselves someday. I think it's just a jumping off point to what I think is going to be a broader issue further on down the road. And I think an office assistant would be a good addition to what I do in this office.
Great. Rick, questions or comments?
I think the fact that we don't have an official designation of an assistant to the town clerk is a shortcoming that we should remedy. The figure here, I'll trust Joe's judgment about would that be adequate to cover him for a fiscal year. For a second help, we considered and accepted one a month or so ago for the treasurer collector for the same kind of approach, kind of an as needed basis. I think Angel uses that person that we approved when tax bills are coming in and so on. I don't think it's out of line for a as needed assistant for the town clerk. is out of line any more than I think it would be out of line for the town administrator to have a similar go-to person for coverage. So I don't have a problem with that at all.
If I could read this to you guys real quick, it's a Mass General Law from Chapter 41, Section 19. It's about assistant town clerks and their powers and their duties. And also that in this chapter and verse, it's the town clerk may in writing appoint an assistant clerk who should be sworn in to the faithful performance of their duties. So by reading that right, I would think that I could actually appoint my own assistant. And it goes on to talk about the assistant town clerk shall, in the absence of the clerk, perform his or her duties, have the powers, and be subject to the requirements and penalties applicable to that person, unless a temporary clerk or appointed pursuant to Section 14, which would be, an employee more than an appointed town clerk on an as-needed basis. I know some towns do have assistant town clerks who are elected. I don't think that's needed at this time, but it could be in the future. And it talks a little bit more about towns having 5,000 or more inhabitants. That does not include us. So I'd be happy to show this to you guys or send it to you, but I do think it spells it out pretty clearly, unless you decide you'd rather do something different, which is certainly in your purview. So maybe hopefully that's helpful.
Great. Terry, any questions or thoughts? Finance Committee? Great. Well, thank you for that, Joe. That seems like something we can, if you want to send us the language, we can look at that too. It sounds like the two options are to have the board hire that person as a town employee, or to have you appoint them as an assistant clerk. Is that am I understanding that right?
I think you have to read this. I think it in a town like ours, it would probably be more of an appointment by the town clerk. But I also think that if it was a larger salary and you were paying benefits and things like that, but that's not what we're doing here.
I see. So it's more like a consulting contract or something like that.
Perhaps I like you and Terry all of you and Terry to read this and put your own interpretation to it. It's chapter 41, section 19. So, and I'll send it to you.
Sounds good.
And then the rest of it, it's just costs are going up. I'm expecting more conferences this year, which I really like to go to. I mean, the more education I can get, the better. I feel my lack of education every day in this role, and I don't like it. So I need to get smarter, become a smarter town clerk. And then office supplies and things like that. It's just, you guys know as well as I, it's the cost of all that is just going up. So I incorporated that into the number.
Right.
And of course, the high end of this is the assistant if we decide to go that route. And, part of me has thought maybe another year would be better because, I'm really not going to have a lot of time in this particular year to really spend time with someone, even though another part of me says this is a perfect time to do it. As we move into the fall elections, bring somebody in for a few hours a day, a few hours a week, and let them see what's really going on, sort of a courage under fire type thing. And see if they really want to do it,
So just curious, Joe, if that's the case, why are you proposing it for this year and not waiting till next year?
Because I'm not sure how I feel about it. And I've been wanting to put it forward for a long, long time. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this is an opportunity to at least talk about it. I almost withdrew it, but I decided not to. So I think I'll leave it here and chew on it for a while longer. And I'd love to hear what you guys think a little bit more in the finance committee. And I honestly think that it's more of a benefit for the town. It will make things more efficient in the long run. You can't help but do that if you get the right person. And I know there's many, many people in this town who would be very helpful in that role.
Well, I think you've made some good arguments for it. My only thought would be to sleep on it and do it in a year when you feel like you can really train that person and get full advantage from them,
And I tend to agree with that, Andrew, but honestly, I've been on the fence about it.
Mhm.
So having a conversation like this with you guys in earnest is helpful. It's really helpful. I mean, we talk in passing. We never have a chance to really talk.
Mhm.
So something like this I like to get things like this out in front of people so I can get their input. And and I appreciate the conversation about it, and then I will sleep on it. Yeah.
Great. Rick.
Yeah, I think many people learn best by doing. I like the baptism by fire thought of this being an election year, and if we're going to see the value in someone specifically designated to pay attention to the town clerk's office, this is a great year to do it. They'll learn a ton if they just stand there and watch. And for that small amount of money, I hope the finance committee would come back and recommend leaving it in as well, and we'll see what happens.
Great.
It would be really helpful just to add one more thing, to have somebody on election day to be in this office, because I am back and forth all day. And I do miss people, when I'm not here. So something like that right there could be invaluable. And of course, I'm not sure I leave somebody alone I didn't think was ready to do it, but that's what Rick means by baptism under fire. And I have a cell phone, and I'm easily reached. So.
All righty. So Joe, your last sheet is the clerk salary page. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I heard a little bit about what you guys were talking about. I think that I think I've struggled with this for years. I believe historically that, and what you have to remember too is that this is an elected position. So anything you look at this, in whatever form you look at it, it's a stipend. It's not really a salary. But the only way to really figure out the value of it in relation to a salary and an hourly rate amount is to do exactly what you're doing, and figure out what's fair. To me, you're right. This is a very low salary that I don't think is conducive to what the role really is. I think I still may be, from an hourly standpoint of the hours that I work, if you look at it comparatively, Shelburne probably still is one of the lower towns in what they pay their town clerks. And I believe this role over the years, actually, when you look back at the history of the town clerks in this job over the years, and I leave myself sort of on the outside of that because, I've only been in the role for 10 years, where you look back at people who've been in it for 20 and 30 years, I think they were all underpaid. And, I think that the times are different, but they were different back then in other ways. And I just believe this is one role that, I appreciate Rick and you, at least talking about it, because I do believe it's a position that warrants a little more research and study on what a fair compensation would be. Even just looking at other towns and comparatively seeing what they pay their town clerks for the same amount of hours, or as close as possible amount of hours that we do here. And, I don't get paid to do elections. Some towns pay their town clerks to do elections. In Shelburne, it's just part of the stipend. So 18-hour days, 15-hour days just become absorbed in the stipend. I'm not complaining. But, there are times that, I think about that. And I think other towns that just pay their town clerks more, it's not such a hard pill to swallow, because it's, they feel fairly compensated. I don't feel unfairly compensated. I just think that it's historically been a little bit on the short end. It'd be great to fix that, and anything I can do to help, I will.
Thanks. Rick, any questions or comments?
Yes, actually, the two back-to-back tonight are what triggered my earlier comments about how concerned I am that we are underpaying people in significant roles. And it's worthy of looking to a broader study that I think you're in support of as well, Andrew. But these two that came before us tonight, I just did some quick math when I got this packet last week. And I looked at the town clerk salary. And I appreciate that that's a salary in the form of a stipend. Joe's published hours currently for the town clerk is 19 hours a week. So I did a little math and it comes up to $27.03 an hour if he were being paid hourly. And then I look at the other sheet we received tonight from the library director position at $28.52 an hour. That seems out of whack. I think we all know there's a whole lot more hours, as Joe just itemized. 16-hour day for elections, other things that he does as well. Not looking to compensate that, but I would think that this number of 26,708 absolutely, in my opinion, should be 28,178 and a match to what we pay our library director. It just seems unreasonable. I know it's what the math has been, but as I said, we've got people 10, 20, 30 years in jobs that haven't renegotiated salary and have taken the minor step increases for a long period of time, and we've gotten behind the curve compared to other surrounding towns. So I have absolutely no problem with the amount he's requested, but I definitely think we should even actually ask the finance committee, or I would like to ask the finance committee to consider increasing what he's asked for to get in fairness to what we already pay our library director, or will be this year.
Well, again, if we're adjusting compensation to account for the fee collection issue, we might address the concern you have right there.
The fee issue would have to go to town meeting.
Right, but that would be a fairly quick adjustment.
Could I just ask or make two quick comments? I don't want to belabor our time together, but I'd like to.
Go ahead, Joe.
The hours that it should add up to 20 hours a week, Rick, because that's what I'm supposed to be posted at.
Okay.
And I think maybe over the last, and in particular, the last 6 months, because of the fact that I was a caregiver from my mother-in-law, I had to change those hours a bit so I could be home in time during daylight savings hours for the caregiver we had there on that day to get home early enough before it got dark, because she didn't like to drive in the dark. So that was an extenuating circumstance that is no longer a circumstance, because, as you know, we lost her Friday night. So I've got to adjust that. If it's not adding up to 20 hours, that's what it needs to add up to, because I have to put 20 hours a weekend. And as you know, I put in more than that. And in regards to the fee structure, the reason why I didn't take the fees is because at the same time I was the town clerk. When I first became town clerk, I was still a selectman. And we found out that was okay through the ethics committee division. But, you know, I always felt like I got a stipend for being a selectman. I got a stipend for being town clerk. I felt like taking the fees. It didn't feel right to me. You know, it felt a little bit like double dipping. So I just never took the fees, even though by a mass general law, I'm allowed a large number of different fees, but the amounts aren't very big that you can keep. But I suppose over a year, I am always surprised when I ask Dara what the fees would have added up to. It's always, a good solid number. But that's the only reason I don't begrudge anybody taking fees. I think the next town clerk should have that right to take it unless we change it beforehand. And because, I think that's something that a town clerk can do. I mean, Janice Purrington from Buckland used to keep the fees. Beverly kept the fees. I just chose not to because I just felt it wasn't something that I should do. And, you know, I still feel that way, so.
My last comment would be that if we don't increase the number that you asked for in that salary position, that you go ahead and start taking them. Fair compensation is fair.
I think the treasurer or accountant would be very upset about that, but not really. They do it now. It's just, you know, yeah, that's just another number for them to figure every month and for me to deal with too.
Yeah, such
But,
as.
yeah, I hear you, Rick. I hear you. Thank you for saying that.
All right, well, if there are no further comments, we'll thank you for your presentation, Joe, and we'll come back to some of those issues as we move the budget along.
Okay, thanks for your time.
All righty, thanks a lot. And
Yep.
I'm sorry to
Yep.
hear about your mother-in-law. Thank you for letting us
Yep.
know.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Andrew. I appreciate it. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Good night.
Good night. All right, well, we now being close enough to 7 o'clock, we can move to John Walsh and the Recreation Committee on their Cal Gym capital needs. John, how are you?
I'm okay, but I have to move my location, so if you could just bear with me a minute.
Okay.
There's still no documentation or paperwork with this line item, right, Terry?
That's correct.
Yeah, so this is all a new learning experience, so I was hoping to just discuss what I see as the priorities at the Cowell Gym and the steps I've taken to kind of look into what is needed. And my understanding was that Norman Beebe was going to also call in. Excuse me, sorry about that. And I don't see him on the call, so I don't know. There is, from my perspective, the priorities really are the fact that we have not done anything to the structure of the building in multiple years, and that having just spent much money in putting in the new heating system and the new cooling system, that there are certain energy efficient things that really still need to be completed. Oh, there's Norm now. One being that in the basement, there are still single pane wooden windows that have been neglected for years. And so I have looked at getting some information about what that's going to cost to replace the windows. I've had two quotes so far, one quote so far, which without installation is nearly $9,000. And that would be putting in double pane, low E argon vinyl windows. And it's approximately 12 of them that need to be replaced. And that did not include the installation, so probably another couple $1,000. I have call in, I actually went down to Home Depot the other day, and I'm waiting on a call from window installers to give me a quote for the full process as opposed to just purchasing them. But that's going to take a couple more weeks probably before I can come up with a number there. The other thing that is on my priority list is that the outside of the building, the painting has been neglected for years. I had hoped to actually pick up a lead paint test kit this afternoon, but I got stuck at my afternoon work job. But right now I have appointments tomorrow and later on in the week for several painters to come by and give us an estimate. I had asked somebody else to prepare an estimate of how much paint was required, but they weren't able to accomplish that because they were out of town. So I need to start back at the beginning from that perspective. The only other major issue for this year, I think, is literally looking at, we have a handicap access gym bleacher that is not working properly. And that really needs to be addressed. I have someone, I think Mary Lou had given us an estimate of $2,200 to have it even just looked at, but that might be on the high side. Norman could address that.
It was $1,100 just to come out and look at it.
Right, okay,
And that's assuming there are no parts needed and they can just repair the thing.
right. So, and then the other issue is the back of the gym on the west, the east entrance. There's an access room there that has the tab room above it. That room actually, the door is actually falling off. It's secured right now with tape. And the roof above it actually has rot in it, and it's going to continue to get worse if it's not addressed, as well as the wall that is next to the basement is now rotting away. And those type of repairs really need to be done as quickly as possible. There are multiple other double hung windows in the basement that are covered probably in lead paint, since they haven't been touched in 40 or 50 years. I don't know when the last time it was painted. So we're looking at an extremely large number of dollars needed to address just the main building structural issues, without even getting into the fact that the gym floor is starting to have dead spots in it. It's been repaired once or twice in the past, but there are still multiple dead spots. And in fact, at some point, it probably needs, the whole gym floor needs to be replaced, is my opinion. All you're seeing now is plugs everywhere in the floor where someone has gone through, drilled out a hole, probably screwed in some type of a screw, and then put in a plug to cover that over. So I think the discussion I want to keep moving forward is, I have urged the rec committee to start thinking about a 5-year plan for what needs to be addressed. Because we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars at this point in repairs that need to be done. Probably some of it not in the first year. If we're talking $10,000-$20,000, I'm just estimating $10,000 for painting. I'm sorry, for windows installed. Probably another $20,000 minimum for painting. We're probably looking at least $50,000 to $60,000 in 1 year to address some of these issues. I have a quote for a door. The door in the tab room was close to $4,000 repaired. No, I'm sorry. Those are other windows. And that doesn't even address the need for window quilts, since the outside windows, someone years ago put up panes of storm windows that are 6 or 3 sections per window. And I was hoping to get into my photos to be able to show you what I'm talking about, but I can't access it for some reason. And there's multiple panes of those storm windows missing. They're just gone. They must have either been blown away or tucked away someplace in the basement, but I don't know where they are. So that's my priority list, and I guess my hope is to have a conversation about how to proceed going forward, because I know Norm has their thoughts about what the rec committee is thinking about, but it's completely separate from me looking at the building itself and trying to maintain the integrity of the building before it rots out completely.
John, I have a couple of thoughts for you. One is that, and this is partly coming from Mary Lou bringing concerns to us at our past meetings, and partly just transition to you as the new director and getting in the chair. But I feel like, as a select board member who receives proposals and concerns from the various boards and committees, that you and the Recreation Committee should have a joint process for putting together your capital plan. And I fully endorse your idea of having a 5-year plan. I think that's an excellent and necessary approach, especially with all the deferred maintenance there. But I think that from a process standpoint, you and the committee should have your own hash out and come to this meeting with a joint recommendation.
I don't disagree, but that's not how the committee perceived it in the past. They feel like they have had no input at all into any of the budget stuff. And so that issue has been broached at the last meeting. And the committee decided not to do anything in the short term. There is a meeting coming up, as Norm will point out, the end of this week to talk about that, but I don't disagree. There is a major communication issue as to what my role is compared to what the rec roles is, and I think that still needs to be addressed.
So I could certainly add to that. I think that the rec committee is responsible for putting on programming. We can suggest things, but ultimately we don't have budget as to what's done with the building. It's a town building. Should we have input into that? Absolutely. Am I willing, as the rec committee, willing to participate in that process with John? Sure. But ultimately it's a town building. I mean, our concern are things that have to do with programming. The handicap accessible bleacher is our top concern. All the other bleachers, I know that Mary Lou is not happy with the other bleachers and has warned that she thinks they're a danger. I don't know if John sees it that way. We don't, as a committee, the other members on the committee, we do not see those bleachers as a danger. We keep them locked up. People who use them, whether it's for Charlemont basketball or other places that need to take them down, they're trained to do it now by John, previously by Bill. And those bleachers we just keep locked up, but we do need access to the handicap accessible bleachers so that there's one bleacher that we can easily put up and down that doesn't exclude people from our building based on their accessibility issues. So that's our top concern in terms of that. We agree with John that it needs to be painted. We're on board with the windows that he's looking at. So I have checked in with people, John. We just didn't have time to do this at our last meeting. The tab room door is a problem. You're talking about the door in the tab room to the outside, right, John?
Yeah, that goes nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That thing is taped up and is just dragging in a cold air. And then there are other things. We like the idea, John had talked about industrial blinds. We would love to see something like that on the window. We think it would save energy. The gym floor dead spots. The basketball people really haven't complained very much about it, but I'm sure it's an ongoing issue. That floor was dealt with, I want to say, maybe 5 years ago by Hilltown Flooring, was it, Terry?
I believe so.
Yeah, and so I was planning to call them just that they could walk the floor, they could walk the gym with Mary Lou, who has noticed dead spots with pickleball, which means that they're really bad, and get a sense from him what would be involved. We had talked about a deep clean at some point. We, as a committee, never followed up. Mary Lou was going to do that and then changed her mind about getting quotes, but the building is pretty filthy still. And that's pretty much it. We have the outdoor courts have started to develop cracks. I have a call in, I've had a call into Vermont Recreational to say, hey, what's going on with this? I'm still hoping that they'll come out and look at it and give us advice because they're the ones that put it in, and it's not that old. And we may want to paint a court or two, but again, those are the recreational needs. So we're fully supportive of John giving this a deep look, and certainly we're happy. It's on the agenda for the next meeting when John gives his report to sort of talk about that.
Well, thank you, Norm. That's helpful. And I would just say I understand that your past practice and your perspective has been, different than perhaps in other town buildings. Just to offer you kind of an analogous situation, the Memorial Hall Theater is managed in a partnership between the Memorial Hall Association and the town. The library is managed in a partnership between the town and the Arms Library Association and the Friends of the Arms Library Association. So we have a number of town buildings where the people who do the programming work in partnership with the town to identify the needs and also to raise outside funds. You know, I mean, you all have modeled that yourselves in writing a grant in recent years to, you know, repave the skating area and stuff. So, you know, you're already doing that. So I think that my strong recommendation would be for you to kind of empower yourselves to be stewards of the building in that same partnership approach that the library and the theater are doing. Both of them, you know, are kind of engaged in very similar kinds of activities that you are, essentially providing arts and cultural activities for the residents of the town in town-owned buildings, much the same way you're doing that with recreational activities. So
And if I could respond, Andrew.
well, let me just finish what I'm saying, John.
Sorry.
So that would be my recommendation, is that you all come up with an operating and a capital expense plan very similar to the way that these other groups are doing. And my recommendation, which I made to Joe just a short while ago, is that you also familiarize yourselves with our new Community Preservation Act, which has a bucket for historic preservation and a bucket for recreational activities, and find out which of the things that you feel are important and want to do would qualify for those funds, because that will save the town some money because it's a matching program. So that's one way that you could get windows done or some other things. You can't fund maintenance with that bucket of money, but you can fund capital improvements and you know, and other kinds of things. So, you know, get familiar with that and think about your 5-year plan in terms of that being one of your potential funding sources.
You know, Andrew, just to address that, Rick and I had talked some time ago about that. And what I learned is that indoor recreation does not qualify.
No, but outdoor recreation does.
Outdoor recreation does, yep. So
there you go. That's what my point is, to get
but
familiar
also
with
the
what's
historical
eligible.
building. Cal is an historical building, but again, that's, you know, a question as to what would count as an historic.
That's right. It takes some research and some asking of questions of that state committee, which is there to help you.
Andrew, I just would like to point out that since I was appointed just in January, that the committee has actually made a lot of strides in actually addressing these type of issues. There is discussion going on, and I think that we as what you're asking to be done is actually in the process of being done.
Right.
So there is going to be times, especially with the urgency of coming up with something for next year's current budget, that the finance committee needs to, and I haven't heard anybody come in yet from the finance committee as to their thoughts about this, and I would like to hear from them. But again, I think substantial amount of money needs to be set aside in this year's budget to address many of these issues. And I think at a minimum, as I said, $50,000 is not even a drop in the bucket of what has to be addressed in the short term. And so I think it's important that they also let us know what they're looking for. As Norman pointed out, the other bleachers not the other bleachers that are operable is not on my high list of things that need to be addressed, but the handicap bleachers are. We're also seeing a reduction in the oil because of the electric heat pumps, but we're seeing a much higher increase in electricity, which we expected. So those are the type of things that this committee has never been involved in those discussions, and it's a learning process. So we're coming to you asking for clarity about what that process is, knowing that there's only 6 weeks left before things have to be completed.
Great. Well, I think it sounds like from what you've described and the projects you've identified and some of the initial estimates you've gone after, that you're on the right track. And again, my you know, advice is just that it's a long laundry list of deferred maintenance. And I would encourage you to focus on the maintenance projects that need repairs and identify the grant opportunities, CPA and others, that might fund the capital needs and recreation program, outdoor recreation that you might want to do.
Can I ask a clarification?
Sure.
Is that CPA money actually available now or is not yet?
No, it'll be available in the next year.
Next fiscal year or?
Yeah, next fiscal year.
So 25, 26.
Right.
Okay, which is the budget we're talking about for this year. And do you
Right,
know
but
what
we
the
have to
quantity-
approve. No,
how
we
much
have to
is-
approve that budget this year, and then we would approve any projects that come out of CPA at next year's town meeting, not this one.
Right, so we're talking basically 2 years before.
2 years out,
everything's
yeah.
gonna be done.
Right.
And we don't know what that bucket of money is going to be at this point.
No.
Well, no, but you can make some guesses.
How? That's what I'm looking for. What guesses am I gonna make?
Terry?
John, if you're able to come up with 3 or 4 top priorities, which I think you've already identified at least 3 to 5, and have a ballpark estimate of what these projects would cost, I'm in the process of seeing how much is set aside in the user fee account reserved for appropriation to see if we can offset some of the costs at town meeting and supplement by another funding stream. But we really do need firmer numbers. If we were to appropriate 50,000, it's really just a guess. And I feel like we owe it to the voters to give them a better idea of what's going to be accomplished with that 50,000.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm hoping to nail down this week with
Okay,
other people coming.
all right. If I can help in any way, let me know.
Yeah,
And
So-
John, those windows are probably CPA eligible too, so.
okay, well, because they're not eligible for Green Communities grants.
Right.
So we can ask for them. Although the window quilts may be eligible as well as energy efficient shades inside may be eligible. So that is also something that should be considered if we're going to apply for a Green Communities grant.
Yeah, Jeff mentioned that earlier tonight.
Yeah,
So yeah, you should work with him on, we authorized him to go ahead with that Green Communities grant. And with the idea that you might add some quilts and shades and things to it.
okay. So the Energy Committee is not proposing anything for Green Communities?
They are, they're working on this, the LED part of it.
That's the Streetlight Committee.
Yes,
I'm talking about the Energy Committee.
no, the project that we've identified that they might work on would be a follow-on project for the subsequent grant that might help us replace the HVAC system in Memorial Hall Theater.
Okay, so that's in the fall.
That's
Okay.
farther down the road.
That's fine. Jeff and I have talked about preparing additional information for that grant for the streetlights, so it would
Okay.
help sell it a little bit more.
Great. So we'll look forward to you coming back with some more projects and some more numbers.
Absolutely.
Great.
And Andrew, just to close the loop on this, I appreciate your comments about Memorial Hall, at least the top floor that they collaborate on. But again, that's never been our assigned role. And so, this is kind of news to us. I mean, we have pointed out things when they collapse, basically. And things that had a direct, impact on how things are going, such as that handicap bleacher. So, but I don't see why we can't work with John, and we're delighted to have John on board so that we can come up with a list, and it would be wonderful to get some of these things rolling.
Yeah, and I think as you're evolving in that direction, just think about those other models. I mean, I currently serve as the Select Board's liaison to the Arms Library on the Pratt Building Committee. So I work with the library director and that board to identify the capital needs of the building,
Yeah, but again, the small difference is that, you know, we have somebody who's in a paid position there that's also managing that thing. You know, John's position is a stipend position. You know,
Right.
we are basically all volunteers as so
And
essentially.
that's the model in Memorial Hall.
Yeah, I'm right. And I can see as more of analogous, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's asking a lot of people and, you know, but we will certainly, with John's guidance, put together a list.
Yeah, it's just that the programmers and users of our town buildings are the ones who are there with their eyes on stuff. So that's why it makes sense to me that you would be the ones to identify capital and maintenance needs and bring a budget to the town and say, here's
Right,
what we're
and I
seeing,
guess
here's
so
what we're
here's-
seeing, you know?
Yeah, and so that's the only thing that I'll push back mildly on. You know, the truth is John is willing to do a lot of this for us, and that's wonderful. But the reality is like, I don't have time to put together, you know, having people come look at the building and give me quotes on this and other things. It's just, that's not, you know, that's not what we've done or what we have time for. You know, it's wonderful that John is doing it. When we had Emily, she wrote a grant to get the outside thing. You know, basically we've identified things and we can prioritize, but you know, in terms of how full that budget is, that will really unfortunately fall on John. It's not that we will, you know, we will help him with it and identify priorities that we see. But again, it's, you know, that's kind of where that is. So,
It's a process. We'll see how it evolves.
okay.
Yeah, and I'm more than, and Norman, I'm more than willing to do the legwork on that type stuff.
Sure. So that is wonderful. And we're fortunate and the town's fortunate to have you.
Well, you know,
But you know, I've always, you know, when Bill was here, Bill didn't have the time to do this kind of stuff. It's just a reality. And, you know,
I
You
think
know,
you have a perfect opportunity this year to get your feet wet, to come up with that initial list for this year. I agree that starting some of these things 2 years from now is crazy. You know, it'll unfold. I think you should come back for this year with your top couple of items that you want to get dealt with. Give your official vote support to John to present it, and Terry's already made the offer to help put it together for you and try to put it before the voters for this year.
yeah. And
Knock off other stuff later, but get started.
Yep, and I think we're grateful that for the support of the Cal. You know, we love the Cal, even though we haven't felt responsible necessarily for putting a budget together for maintenance. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to see the building.
Of course.
Before.
Great. Well, thank you both for coming in,
Andrew.
and
Thank you, Rick.
we'll look forward to the next step in the conversation.
And thank you, John.
just
I will
like to
see
know-
you.
I would just like to know what the finance committee is thinking at this point, because they haven't weighed in at all.
We haven't
John,
heard from them tonight.
We don't have a quorum for the finance committee, so they're
Okay.
just two members listening in,
Okay,
taking it all in, and they'll discuss it as a committee.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
Terry. And thank you, John. I'll see you on Wednesday, John.
Wednesday,
Thank you, Norman.
I thought it was Thursday.
The 13th.
Okay, thank you.
I'll send out the agenda too.
I have it. Yep, great. Thanks.
Okay, bye, John. Thank you. Bye, Andrew, Rick, Terry.
Bye-bye now. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, we are on to old business. RFP for solar array for highway pole barn roof. Item A. Terry.
I've forwarded the draft with your comments to the chief procurement officer at the FERCog and asked to set up a meeting to review the draft. I've yet to hear back from her, and I will send out another request tomorrow. And if I don't hear from her, I'll go to Bob Dean directly.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. We'll look for that on our next meeting. Item B is Roselli Clark and Associates regarding the offer to meet GASB 34 compliance discussed with Finance Committee. Finance, I saw the memo back and forth between Finance and who was that? The accountant? Our town
Yes.
accountant?
No, it's an auditing firm that we've
I mean, our auditing
for
firm, I'm
next
sorry.
fiscal
Yes,
year.
right. Rick, your thoughts on that?
We had at the last meeting asked the finance committee to give us their opinion about the value of spending 10,000 for the auditor to do the deep dive on that adverse opinion section that we've had for decades, apparently, plus the costs as outlined by the new auditors in that email that you just referenced a moment ago, where we would have to hire other people to gather the information for them to even be able to pull it off. So we asked the finance committee to weigh in on it, and unfortunately they can't this evening. I think we have to sit on it and wait until they are able to give us an opinion, unless they've already done that and can tell us tonight what they think.
Anybody from the finance committee want to speak to this issue? I hear nothing. Yeah, I guess my only comment, having read the auditor's comments, is that to me, it still falls into the bucket of being an unfunded mandate from the state, and that, you know, it's the kind of thing that you do it when you need to do it, not when you to do it every year. I mean, the example that the auditor offered of a town near us that is moving partially in that direction was Bernardston, and there again they noted that the Bernardston opted not to do the the assessment of town assets because it's so laborious, and you have to do it again anyway if you go out for a bond. So I just assume wait until if we ever go out to acquire a bond, that's when we would meet this GASB requirement. And otherwise, I don't personally, having an adverse opinion on our books we've been doing for many years that without harm to us. So I don't see any reason to fix something that ain't broken.
Andrew, I felt the same way initially when when this first came to us. It does appear, actually, I rather enjoyed the new auditor's dissertation, let's call it. I mean, he was asked a question, and boy, did he do his job. I'm very impressed with what he told us. And he made the case both ways, actually. Kind of somewhere in the middle, I think, was a consistent theme of whether it's a big deal or not. And it does appear, as you said, until we need a bond, it's not a big deal. So I've had that feeling from the get-go. If the finance committee can give us documentation and a good explanation of why I'm wrong, why perhaps you're wrong, I'd love to hear it. So that's why I still want to not make any decision on this until we hear from people that have perhaps a better grasp of things like that. But my first question was, when was the last time town of Shelburne asked for a bond? And I couldn't find anybody that remembered. So we'll wait till we hear from the finance committee, would be my opinion.
Yeah, and just reading the auditor's report, I mean, it made total sense to me on two counts. One, he landed, technically in the middle, because as he said, as an auditor, he's not really allowed to tell us to break the law or to have, to go in for an adverse opinion. So he was just saying, as your auditor, I have to tell you this, but he also said that, the towns to the east of us, which are generally larger, do go out for bonds regularly, which is why they do GASB. And the towns to the west of us are much more scattershot because they're small and they don't go out for bonds, so we're more in that category in my view, but I agree with you, Rick. I think let's wait and see what the finance committee says, and if they want to make a case for this or not.
Great.
Good. All right. Anything further on that?
No.
All right. Well, item C is Mohawk Trail Regional School District regarding use of surplus funds for an enhanced 911 system. Terry, where are we on that?
I spoke with Donna this afternoon. She reviewed the Mohawk Trail Regional Agreement and said there's nothing in the agreement relative to surplus funds being expended, nor is there sufficient guidance in the statute. She doesn't believe that the select board has the authority to make the determination to spend the money, to spend the surplus money on something else. So she's recommending that this become an article on the annual town meeting warrant. Have the Mohawk Trail Regional District submit it to the member towns as a capital request, and just let the surplus funds come back to the town as it was intended.
When does that happen?
I'm not really sure when those funds come
When they
back.
normally come back? Because it's a chunk of money. It's like 20 something grand, right?
Yes, and that is clearly defined. Apparently, we can take the money or we can ask them to put it toward, next year's capital assessment. So those two things are allowed, but she doesn't think it's advisable to tell them to spend the money on something else without town meeting's approval.
My 2 cents, Andrew, is that I think we should have that money returned to the town, as is the normal process, and have them put in a new request that we can take to town meeting to see if the town would like to appropriate that money to fund it through other avenues.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Yeah, my only question there, Terry, is you sort of suggested there were 2 ways for the town to receive the money back. One being just for it to go into the general fund, and the other being some kind of motion to allocate it toward next year's school capital expenses. How does that latter path work? Is that a warrant article, or is that, how would we actually do that?
I'd have to go back and review the business manager's email. I believe he offered those 2 options. And I also believe that Donna said that that's mentioned in chapter 71, section 16B for excess funds. She thinks it's spelled out there too, but this was a end of the day conversation and I didn't have a chance to reference that chapter.
I have the letter in front of me from, that was the original request in that regard. And he said, per the Mohawk Trail Regional School District policy, any capital balance remaining after completion of the 911 projects may at each town's specific request be, 1, returned by direct payment to the town, applied to the town's capital assessment for the next fiscal year, or retained by the school district to be applied to future capital improvements. It's the same thing. The townspeople voted for that money to be used for a specific purpose. It wasn't all needed. It should come back to the town and let them ask for whatever they're looking for later down the road, and we'll take it to town meeting, as we did with this first money. So I think that's the clean, easy paper trail that the town should follow personally.
Donna also questioned, what is the Mohawk Trail Regional School District policy? How does that differ from the regional agreement? And why didn't they include a copy of that in their request? She just thinks it's cleaner.
That's why I like just.
I think I'm in agreement with Rick. I think I'm just trying to visualize explaining this warrant article to the voters, and I think it's just simpler to just say they had some surplus last year and they turned it back to us, and now they're asking for this. And from a conceptual point of view, you can just say, well, yeah, that surplus is effectively going to pay for this, but it's a new, in reality, it's a new capital item, and we vote it yes or no.
Yep. And I think there was still confusion as to whether, in fact, there is a 2025 deadline for that. Apparently, it's a 2006 initiative, whatever the right word was, something to the effect of if you upgrade your 911 system, it has to meet this standard. But we haven't upgraded the 911. They're telling us, not in writing, I don't believe, but in the meeting, that there was a deadline when he appeared before us a couple of weeks ago, of getting it done by 2025. And if that's the case, great, bring it to town meeting, present it. But
Yeah, it sounds like we have time to do that.
so
Good.
do
Well, I think we're in agreement on that, Rick. I think we can just,
respond to that.
Terry, you can let them know that's kind of where we're heading with that.
Okay.
Good. Do you want a motion to that effect or not?
No, I don't think it needs a motion. I
Okay.
think they requested, unless you feel like you want to make a motion.
No, I think if, well, Rick, do you feel like you need a motion on that or not?
When in doubt, why not? It's 2 seconds. I would move that
Alright.
we not approve the request to retain the capital funds for the 911 project, and that the surplus be returned to the town.
I'll second that. If there's no further discussion, we'll vote. Rick,
Aye.
Andrew's aye, and the motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Any other business? Do we have any other business, Terry?
No.
Our next meeting is March 25th. We have correspondence from Jennifer Bauman resigning from the Shelburne Cultural Council, and from Joe Palmieri resigning from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Thank you both for your service. Joe, for your extensive service of 20 years. That's impressive longevity for the Zoning Board of Appeals, and a lot of knowledge is going with you on that zoning matters there.
I've sat in on a couple of their meetings, and he has been a wealth of knowledge for sure.
Yeah.
You're right on with that comment, Andrew.
Yeah. Let's see. Good. Well, I think we're down to public comment. Is there any members of the public who want to make a comment?
Actually, I have a comment real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I be a public member today?
I recognize you.
I missed one of my liaison report comments that I definitely would feel bad if I had completely neglected finding it down at the bottom of the sheet now that we're there on our agenda. We had mentioned that the MEMA, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Authority, had not given us any money in the relief funding from the disaster relief funding from the July storms that other towns around us got funds for, and that our emergency management director, Tom Williams, took it upon himself to go ahead and seek out why. And we heard that that they did find that there was a, I forget the word I quoted last time, a transcription error, I think it was, that as I think you know, Andrew, as well already, that they have in fact decided that $20,000 will be coming back to the town on that oversight. And thanks again to Tom Williams, our emergency management director, for pursuing it.
Great. Well, thanks for putting that into the public record there, Rick. I saw those emails and was appreciated Tom's catching that oversight and making sure that Shelburne got reimbursed there. But that was great work. Good. Well, if there's no further public comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And I will second. And all in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and we are adjourned. All right. Well, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
everybody.